Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Minding Dementia Summit. I have the great honor and pleasure of introducing our next speaker to you. His name is Mr. Samuel Simon, and Sam is here today to share with us his remarkable story of bravery and strength after receiving a devastating diagnosis in 2021 that he has early onset Alzheimer's disease. Sam's inspirational story is one of courage and the determination to transform his life altering situation into an inspiring one for all. Please let me introduce you to Mr. Sam Simon. Sam, we are so honored to have you here today, and thank you so much for your willingness to come on and share your personal story with our tremendous audience at the Minding Dementia Summit today. And I think that people will be inspired by your story, especially because I think most of us, if and when we ever received a diagnosis from our doctors that we had early onset Alzheimer's disease or the common form of Alzheimer's disease, we probably would react to it much differently than you have. So I can't wait to hear how you were able to do that after hearing that you truly do live with early onset Alzheimer's disease. How did you not see yourself as a victim? Or if you did, then how did you turn that around and do what you're going to share with us you have done with knowing that you live with early onset Alzheimer's disease?
So I'm going to argue with the slight phraseology. First of all, Lisa, thank you for having me. I'm so delighted in this summit and this work to raise the visibility and help change some of the narratives around the word that I hate to mention. We'll talk about that for a moment. But
Okay.
I understand what I have as early stage. The difference being that early onset refers to a younger person. I'm 78. I'm living technically in my 79th year of life.
Oh, that's my mistake. Yes, early onset is much different than early stage. So that definitely clarifies that. So you were in your very early stages of the traditional Alzheimer's disease, which,
well, the question is how early.
okay.
You know, there's all sorts of challenges about this. So it's a great way to start this is how do you find out you have a disease like this? And then what do you do about it? The first instinct was not, in fact, and I'll tell a little bit about symptoms in a minute, but the first instinct, once you get the diagnosis, and in the play, it's Susan and I, it's hard to get the diagnosis, let me say. And part of my message is, if you think you have a memory issue and if you're worried about it, check it out. There is this great reluctance for people to self-identify, and there is also this fiction that you can't do anything about it. Yes, there is no cure right now. And the sooner you are identified of having a cognitive disorder, whether it's Alzheimer's or Lewy body or anything, the more you can do, if nothing else, to make your actual life better. And yes, you get a diagnosis like that, and it's going to be scary. And I don't think my situation is that different. First, what happens is you begin to have symptoms that something's wrong. And then you try to understand it. If you're like me, I probably had symptoms 15 years ago when I complained to my internist during a regular physical that I thought I was having trouble with my memory. And he said, "Oh, I know you. No, you're not. Now, if you couldn't remember what you had for breakfast, then I'd be worried." Well, I sat there and said, "What did I have for breakfast?" And I couldn't remember, except I was head of my public affairs company. I was running this thing. He knew me as this very public person. he sent me to a psychologist, not to a neurologist,
Hmm.
who did some mini mentals and gave me an depressant. And then I, hang around other CEOs, other business people, and found out a lot of the people like me were getting antidepressants so that was 10, 15 years ago, and longer than that. The symptoms became different. And I wonder what would happen had I been sort of more aware of what was going on in my head early on. Again, my current doctor had sort of the same reactions. I started having things uh, things go wrong in life. By the way, if you have a memory issue and you get diagnosed, you will find out that when you look back, and I do this physically sometimes, I look backwards in the last few years, you will have seen it coming. My favorite thing is I ran a company, right? It grew up to be 50 million people, 50 employees, not million, 50 employees. I could almost keep the numbers in my head. I did really well, and I did. But when I sold it and at home, I would do my Quicken every Sunday. It's just ritual. Every Sunday, do my personal Quicken. I stopped doing it, and it was like, oh, I'll get to it. I'll get to it. And for a full year, before I was diagnosed, I just didn't. But it just wasn't getting done, and I realized that it became too difficult.
And
But
can I
I
ask
did.
a question? Did your
Yeah.
wife Susan notice any of the milder, more kind of more subtle symptoms that you were having?
Yeah, and I think she probably, much like everybody else, just thought it was part of getting older.
Okay.
She wasn't so involved in the money side of things that she said, "Well, how come we don't have cooking done today?" And it just we're very fortunate and we live a good life. But then a couple of other things started happening. Okay, things I did begin to notice. Oddly, for me, they were about driving. I it gets your attention when it's in the play. I'm at a meeting, I leave my business meeting, go to the parking lot, get in my car, pull out, turn right, go up to the stop sign, turn left. All of a sudden, horn honks from every direction. I don't understand what they're about or that they're about me. And then I notice at the next intersection, 4 cars turning into my side of the road. I'm on the wrong side of the road.
Oh.
And I don't know that. And then there was another time where I lost what I lost cognitive awareness in the car. That is, I felt like it was in this moving, floating machine. And I saw street signs, but they didn't make sense. And I can remember those so clearly even now. And they drove me. In fact, it was that last thing when I described that to my internist, who also he was new internist from that first thing, but he's my current internist, and he, by and large, said, "Well, you're just an overeducated man overreacting to normal aging." And we'll all get that. I think a lot of people get that.
They
Then I
do.
tell him about these traffic things, and then he refers me to a neurologist, and that's the beginning of finding out. That trip, that part of uh, the process of just getting to know what's wrong with you is one of the hardest things out there for everybody today. It needs to be fixed, even the neurology department. Because I believe, because most forms of quote dementia, I hate that word, by the way, we'll talk about that before this. But the neurologist, if you're a doctor and somebody has what they think is a terminal disease, they don't tend not to want to spend that much more time with you. Get your affairs in order. And even though it's early stage, our first neurologist, when I pressed him, well, what's my, he told me I had mild cognitive impairment. And I said, but I didn't have tau tangles. It wasn't bad. And I said, well, what should I do? What's what's going to happen to me? He said, there's only one road for you, Sam. You're just going to get worse. And he had to leave for another patient. And we have a good neurologist now, and I was very lucky. have a definitive diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease, you need a PET scan with contrast. They're just beginning to have some coverage by Medicare, but by and large, they're not covered.
Right,
And they're about $8,000 a piece.
right.
But because I live in Washington and there was a hospital that had drug trials and somebody we knew the head of that. So we got referred. We're very lucky. And they found out that I was eligible for a drug trial. And that's how I got my definitive diagnosis, because they paid for the cost of a PET scan and the MRI. And I am what's called amyloid positive. The good news is I don't have the tau tangles. Tau tangles are like worms in your brain. They appear as black things in your brain. And that would put me much further down. They're much more impactful on life. But getting the diagnosis of, it's not funny, but the more I think about it, we were new neurologist. He got the results of the exam, of this PET scan, because of trying to see if I could qualify for a drug trial. And he sits there and he's in his office. We weren't in the exam room. He invited us he got the results into his private office. He once told us it's very hard giving bad news. And he sort of looks down at my file and he mumbles, early stage Alzheimer's. And it's so odd that in that moment, Susan and I don't quite know how to react. And, it took some time. I owe a lot of gratitude for my attitude and for how I got moved to write. Is I had written this is my second play. I wrote a prior play because this is Susan and I, we're now 57 and a half years married. At our 34th year, at Susan's 34th year of marriage, she was diagnosed with advanced breast cancer and we were told basically that she wouldn't survive. Now, she is an unlikely survivor, but I had to cope with the imagining having to hold her in my arms as she took her last breath. So I got involved in theater. That play called The Actual Dance toured for 10 years. It's now a book. But it helped understand a little bit. Now Susan and I are changing. It helped the role of theater. My journey with that, where I talk about being upset. I couldn't imagine. I can imagine myself dying, but I can't imagine holding the person I love most in this world as she dies. And that was writing about it and performing about it was the best medicine of sorts. I now, in retrospect, say I had post-traumatic spiritual disorder. And, once I went through it, it took me 9 years to start writing about it. So that my point is theater and arts and writing are great medicines for the personal turmoil and I think almost anybody can do it.
Well,
I was a novice.
tell us about your play, The Dementia Man. What exactly should people expect to see? Tell us a little bit about the actual play.
So I'll be glad to. So I ended up writing this with the suggestion and encouragement of my fellow actors who I got to know through the actual dance. That's the point of that. Dementia Man is my journey, and it confronts the tragedy narrative. It is both biographical, also advocacy, and it is a advocacy in part for also the world being accommodating people like you, like me. So it starts with the idea, and there are advocates out there. There are people and there's movements out there that say the life with the disease is not worth living. And so I imagine that option. How do you deal with, should I end it all right now? Do I really want to go through this? or should I go? And there are people who advocate for this, and there are that just go to a state. I don't know if I don't think you can do this in the United States. Switzerland, you can go to and qualify for a company suicide. And that's a thematic background. Should I do that? As I confront the diagnosis and what to do about it, and come to the realization that I can live a meaningful life with this disease. And I even know I will, God willing, live long enough, transform and become someone else. And I note, not something else, someone else. I've come to understand that we don't really know what goes on behind that face, whatever that face may become. We don't know, but I believe, and there are people out there, who do this so well. Lynn Castile Harper, the Reverend Lynn Castile Harper, has written a book called On Vanishing. She's a minister for older people at Riverside Church, and she argues that the congregation becomes worse off when somebody with the disease can't attend any longer. That we, those with this disease, can still, no matter who we are, add value to the community. So I'm a voice for that. I used to be active in the disability movement when I was younger, and I imagine that there could be what I call CNs, cognitive navigators, available to us deeply forgetful and confused people. Just like wheelchairs. There's a time where people couldn't move around on sidewalks, and there were objections to the curb cuts. There were people who had said, well, they're going to be billions of dollars, and I don't see anybody in wheelchairs outside. Well, duh. But you don't see people who have cognitive disorders. And by the way, again, they're early stage. I can be out and about. I now take medicine, so I can still drive, but usually Susan's with me. And I can get lost even with GPS and get confused. And I can still be reasonably independent. And if the world was designed to be aware that I might be around, so that there are places where they're like yellow flowers that say, come here for help. If there are cognitive navigators, if the bus people or trained conductors were trained on how to help in people. If Amtrak, for example, I'll be on that this weekend, were trained so that they could have somebody help make sure I found the person waiting for me, and could, if I had a problem, knew how to work with me. It wouldn't be that, we put people who can barely move in wheelchairs on these devices, and we put people who are blind and deaf, and we should also make our lives, those with this early stage particularly, there will be a time when that can't happen, and I know that. The line in the play is, I know this disability stuff is, this mind stuff is different than wheelchairs. I know that. It is different, but we need to not shut us off. We are at a phase still in history where people believe that we should be locked up in a room and the keys and us basically thrown away, because the challenge is very much on the care partner. I've come to believe that it's harder on in this disease context. It is harder for that person to watch the changes in their loved one than it is for us who have it. And it is. And then finally, in the play, I want us to get rid of the word dementia. I'm not crazy. I'm not insane. I'm not mad. And the history of that word is, the line in the play is, I want to throw it on the same trash heap of history as words like retarded and the N word. Now, I've been challenged. What? You say that and you call your play Dementia Man? Well, it's the popular word. If I call myself cognitively impaired man, I'm not sure anybody's going to come see it. I don't know what the new word is, but I'm not alone. There are large movements. There are two things that worry me. One is there are new medicines and new treatments that people will not know if they don't get checked out. Don't be afraid to identify. There will be more and more help. ADA, Americans with Disability Act, kind of help available if people know that we're out there and need it. People in wheelchairs weren't out there, so why build it? But once we had the curb cuts, the chairs are everywhere, and the people who happen to be in the chairs are with them. And there will be side benefits. Now everybody uses the curb cuts and baby carriages and the like. There'll be side effects for learning how to adapt to make the world more accessible to people like us and to
Sam,
live.
I just got the signal that we are kind of running down on our time.
Okay.
And I wanted to give the audience enough time to know how they can find you. But I do want to just make a quick comment because I completely agree with everything that you have said today. And I think it's even more important that we start giving more help to folks who do have cognitive impairments, because we know, and I don't know if you all know, but the number of people who've been projected to develop Alzheimer's disease and other brain diseases is going to nearly triple in the next 25 years, actually 23 years, 2050 is the mark. And you probably will agree with me, Sam, we're not prepared for that. We are not prepared to help people function in their worlds with this disease. So I am so thankful. This has been such a heartwarming discussion for me. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being here and sharing your personal experience and opening people's eyes to what you said, because it's absolutely true. I've been working with families for 30 years now, and there's no question in my mind, I have seen it time and time again, that people can live purposeful, meaningful lives for a long, 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 long
Yeah.
time. So I'm sure everybody is absolutely fascinated and intrigued with what you've shared with us today. And they're going to want to know how to find the dementia man, even though we'll have to think of a really, fun substitute for that word for you. But I'll let you share your contact information with them.
Well, it's the website is www.dementiaman.com. And they can reach out to me directly at sam@dementiaman.com. I would love to come and perform. It is an in-person thing. Now, I would say it needs to be, if you're interested in bringing me to your community, the sooner the better. Even listening to me, people can think, well, he doesn't really have it. And the answer is I do. And, I've started something called cognitive diaries to write down the particular events, and they're troubling events, where I have the disease and there are consequences. And so I have an uncertain amount of time which I could do it. So I'd love to come out there. I find great meaning in hearing the audience and learning, and I want to be part of the voices, along with yours and others, that raise up for people to imagine living meaningful lives, to have the world change, to adapt to us, to help the very badly broken neurology system in particular transform into being an open, welcome, totally supportive medical infrastructure. Because you're right, the baby boomer generation, which has driven this country from its beginning, is into this era, and their kids. And so it will be huge. It isn't just the people with the disease, it's the families that work and want and love I am loved. I am somebody who is, in the play, I want to be married 60 or 70 years, not just 57 and a half years.
Aw, that's so sweet.
And so I would hope, and then this is an opportunity for discussions. People can bring in people, whether to help these discussions, get news coverage. There is a lot of change coming. Given my experience, I'll be quick. When my wife had breast cancer, they didn't think she was going to survive. The phrase triple negative didn't even exist at the time. Most of the kinds of treatments didn't exist. Now, that was 23 years ago. There are going to be like kind of transformations in this field. And the
Absolutely.
world has to get ready for it. And we have to have people, because they need people like me. I'm in a drug trial. If people don't go in drug trials, we won't get new medicines. And I
Right.
sign up for every study of the brain. This is in play too. Every study of the brain that exists in hopes of not only adding a few productive years to my life, but also for others in the future. And I say to this audience, and maybe helped by people like you, those listening, that you will be a help to not just me, but anybody and this whole community. And that's the invitation, I think, to bring the awareness and encourage people to step up and help find our cures. It won't be a single one.
Well, I will personally encourage everybody and anybody to contact you, look at your website. You have certainly been just a tremendous inspiration to me, and I hope you have been to everybody that's listening to your story right now. So thanks again for being here, Sam.
Thank you.
I hope that we have an opportunity to keep in touch and to chat again. So thanks again for being here. You really are a remarkable, remarkable human being.
Thank you.
Glad to know you.
All right.
Okay, take good care.
So we're just done?